If you had come up to me 15 years ago and said, in 15 years' time, you're going to be presenting to rooms full of global leaders, talking about speaking and your experience of speaking and what it's like to speak as a female leader, I probably would have backed away from you very slowly, thinking, crazy person alert. Even 5 years ago, after I finished my master's degree in voice coaching and training and I'd started my business, the thought of standing in front of global leaders and telling them how they might be able to communicate more effectively, whilst I cognitively knew what they needed to do and I cognitively knew what I could tell them and how I could add value, I didn't truly believe that I had the right to take up that space, the right to talk to them about those kinds of things. And so even 5 years ago, I probably would have been like, yeah, it's a great idea. And in theory, I could do it. But in practice, it felt like a really, really long way away. Now, this month, even in the following 3 weeks, I am doing 3 different presentations, lectures, speeches all around Europe on different topics to different groups of people. So the reason that I'm telling you about my story is not because you need to know about my story, is because that learning to step into your executive presence is something that is learnable. It is a skill, just like baking a cake, just like riding riding a bike even. It is a skill that you can build up through practice, support, through coaching. It isn't something that you're born with. So today we are going to be diving in to the 5 things that you can do to create executive presence when you're giving a keynote speech. What are the 5 things you really need to think about when you're delivering a keynote? Welcome. If we haven't met before, my name is Emma. I am the founder and CEO of Speaking at Work. I work mainly with women, helping them raise their visibility and credibility at work, although I do have a few very lovely male clients. Today, we're really going to be talking about the 5 things that you need to do to think about, to really incorporate into any keynote speech that you are about to do. So first of all, we should look at why we should say yes, because often I work with women who are offered these opportunities to go and speak at conferences or be part of a panel discussion. And having spoken to lots of them, I know the tendency is to go, oh, no, you should probably go and ask so-and-so. They know a lot more than I do. Or, oh, no, I'm a bit busy at the moment and I don't really have time to think about what I need to say. And we find lots of reasons why we're going to say no. So let's dive into the reasons why we should definitely say yes. As a leader and as you're going up through your career, one of the things that is really critical for you to make sure you continue to be promoted is about visibility. So we can very easily assume that by doing a good job, we are visible. By just getting things done in a really calm way, making sure our teams are happy, making sure we're communicating effectively, that is enough to get us to be visible within our organizations. And unfortunately, I would love to say that that's true, but it isn't, because of a few different reasons. And one of those reasons is that as women, we don't tend to talk about our achievements. So they can go a little bit unnoticed. We just assume that everybody else sees that things are getting done and done brilliantly, but that's not always the case. So by being given this opportunity to give a keynote speech, there may be opportunities for you to talk about things that you and your team have achieved and how you did it or your perspective on things. And it just raises your visibility in ways that are much more impactful than just general living your life in your corporate space. The other thing it really helps is with credibility. If you've been asked to go and do a keynote speech, there's usually a reason for it. It's because of your position, because of a project that you've done, because of a connection, whatever it might be. They've asked you for a specific reason. So you want to really kind of dive into that and hold on to that and use it as a leverage for your credibility. because if they've asked you, it's because they believe that you're credible, and it will just help leverage your credibility that tiny bit more. Now, it's really important to focus in on the asking you bit, because I know that's a bit that can make a lot of women kind of go, oh, I feel a bit uncomfortable. Why have they asked me? I don't know everything about this subject, and I know that so-and-so knows a lot more than I do. But they asked you. And so taking some time to really kind of think about what it is that you uniquely have to offer can be really helpful in these scenarios. And I'm not talking about necessarily all of your technical skills, although those are very, very important. I'm talking also about your personality and about the connections that you already have or might make. So that's really, really important. And that brings me on to the next thing, and that is connections. So doing these keynote speeches helps create connections. Now, women are generally fantastic at networking across, so at peer level and down. We are less effective when it comes to networking in an upward fashion, so to people who are more senior than we are. We're very hesitant to put ourselves forward to network with those people. So when we ask to do a keynote speech, you are naturally put in front of people who are more senior as well as who are lateral and below you. So these scenarios provide incredible opportunities for networking up and down the chain of command. So it's definitely worthwhile saying yes for those reasons. It's also worthwhile in that you will be exposed to lots more information and different perspectives on things, because usually if you're asked to do a keynote speech, there will be other speeches that are going on as well, or other workshops. And it's really helpful because we can sometimes feel we're in a little bit of an echo chamber. You know, in our organization, we'll have a there's a culture, there's things that we talk about within our organization. But once you step outside that and you're interacting with other people from other organizations or even other kind of communities completely, it's really helpful because you start to see trends. So you'll see the things that are bothering other people. You'll see information that they're talking about, what's going on in their organizations. And we start to make some really interesting connections between what we already know and what other people are thinking. And we build our understanding, we build our schemas so that we have a richer, more diverse way of talking about or thinking about the things that are affecting us as human beings and also our organizations and our teams. The other reason you should say yes is because this is a perfect opportunity to start developing your thought leadership. So there's a big difference between talking about what you know, which is an expert presentation, and your thought leadership, which is really about taking what you know about what is true now and thinking about how that might impact on us in the future and how that might impact as things change in our working environments or in our social environments. So thought leadership is just taking what you already know, what you're working with all the time, adding in some of your experience, but also thinking about the so what. So what if this happens in the future? What does that mean? If that happens in the future, if these two things collide in the future, this is what it could mean. That's what thought leadership is. So having these opportunities to do a keynote speech gives you the opportunity to start thinking about what is my position? What do I really think is going to happen? What do I think is going to slow down or speed up or impact our industry or our market sector? So saying yes gives you an opportunity to think about your thought leadership and what you really want to be saying, what you want to sort of put your flag in the sand for and say, right, this is what I believe. This is where we're at. And this is where I think we could be if we do X and Y and Z. And the final reason I really, really think you should say yes to any opportunity to do a keynote speech is because doing builds confidence. So lots of women come to me for coaching and they come to me saying, I want to build my confidence. Can you help me build my confidence? And I always explain at that point that confidence is a byproduct. It's not something that I can give you. It is not something that you can take a magic pill for. You only derive confidence for having done something that feels super stretchy or even a little bit stretchy, super stretchy even better, and have done it really well. Then your confidence builds up because you can look back and go, I did okay. I did this brilliantly. I'd like to do that better next time. And that's where our confidence starts to build from having done the thing itself. So if you want to feel more confident in giving keynote speeches, guess what? you have to give more keynote speeches to build the confidence. So it's a catch-22. You've just got to get out there and start doing it. So those are all the reasons that I think that you should say yes every single time somebody comes to you and says, would you mind speaking at our conference? Would you do a presentation to our team? Just say yes. Yep. Say yes. You are doing yourself and them a huge favor. Now, here are all the reasons you are going to want to say no thank you to that opportunity and give it to someone else. So the first one is that your inner critic, if giving a keynote speech feels even remotely stretchy, your inner critic on hearing the words, would you speak to our team or would you come and speak at our conference, is going to go, oh, no. And it's going to start jumping up and down and shouting very loudly, this is a bad idea, sit down, stop talking, say no, and it's going to give you lots and lots of reasons why you shouldn't do this thing. And those reasons will feel like the truest of truths. You're too busy. You don't have time to really think about it. It might tell you that you're not the expert in this particular area and they should go and speak to so-and-so or this other person because they really know a lot more than you do. And those things can all feel really super true, but they're not. They are your inner critic. Now, having said that, if you really are pressed, if your calendar is back to back and you genuinely don't have time, that is a different thing. But we can often say we don't have time to do things when, if we really put our mind to it, we could find some time to talk about it, especially if it's our area of expertise, because you already know a lot about your area of expertise. And if you sat down for an hour, you could probably put together a 30-minute presentation pretty easily, probably even less time if we think about the AV support, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So the first reason you're going to want to say no is your inner critic is going to have a party and tell you all those really truthful reasons why you shouldn't do this. And I say truthful because it's going to feel truthful, because that's what the inner critic is really, really good at. The second reason you are going to want to say no is because you're not fully owning your expertise. So it's very easy to think that an expert is somebody who has to know everything and has to have been doing their role for, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And, you're only 5 years into this particular role. So it's very easy to think that you're not an expert. But there's two very important things you need to know about expertise. So first of all, an expert is someone who skillfully applies their knowledge and ability. And second thing, experts don't know everything. All experts in all fields, all over the world, are all learning all the time. So as long as you know more than the people that you're talking to, you're an expert. And I can pretty much guarantee that will be the case. So when we don't own our expertise, and there's lots of psychological reasons why we don't own our expertise, it will leak out of our body language. It will leak out in the way that we speak and in terms of our tone of voice. It will leak out in the words that we choose. So if we don't feel like we are an expert in our field, we will want to say no. You are an expert in your field. It's just there's some stuff, some thoughts that are getting in the way at the moment. And usually that's down to the inner critic. Like I said, there is another reason we might want to say no, and that's about time and brain space. But I guarantee you know more than enough to sit down for 1 hour and put together a 30-minute presentation. I absolutely know that for sure. There isn't a woman that I haven't worked with who couldn't do that. Given that 1 free hour, they could write down, even if it was a few scribbles on a piece of paper, you would definitely be able to do that. Given the right structure, you could absolutely do that. And then the final reason you're going to want to say no is to do with exposure. So as women, we are, because of our brain structures, because of the way we work, because of our emotional makeup, we are very good at seeing other people. So we can walk into a room and we can see who's happy and who's sad and who's angry, and we can read our team really well. We know what's going on with them. We can hear when somebody's not fully on board. And we're very good at picking up on all those signals. We're very, very good at seeing the people that we work with. When that camera gets turned around and we feel like we are being seen For most women, that is a bit less comfortable. There are a few women who really enjoy that moment of being in the spotlight, but most women that I work with would say, oh, I don't like it when the attention is on me. It makes me feel really, really uncomfortable. Now, in that moment of somebody asking you to do a keynote speech, a presentation at a conference, you're going to feel like that spotlight is turning towards you, and the temptation will be to go, oh no, I don't like it. I don't want that attention on me. So that feeling seen piece can get in the way of us saying yes. But let's recap on why you should be saying yes to doing a keynote speech, because you will be more visible. And that is really, really important for your career. You need to be front of mind when those promotions and those special projects come around. So you need to be more visible. It will lend you even more credibility than you currently have. They asked you. They didn't ask someone else. They asked you. Therefore, they believe that you have something useful to offer. You're going to make useful connections doing it, whether that is the organization that's creating the conference, whether that's networking at the conference, and in terms of what you know. You're going to make mental connections when you're exposed to new people, new information, new ideas. You can start to develop and put out there your thought leadership. So you're becoming known as the go-to expert for whatever is your area of expertise. And finally, doing it is going to build your confidence. That's the only way that confidence arrives. You have to do it to feel more confident. Once you've done it once, you can do it again and again and again. And the confidence continues to build and build and build. And you'll really feel like you're taking up your physical and vocal space with as much authenticity as it's possible to do. So those are the reasons why I genuinely think you should be going out there and doing keynote speeches, and why you're going to want to say no. So have a think about those. But now it's time to take that deep dive into the 5 things that you really need to be thinking about when you're about to sit down, create that presentation, create that talk, so that you're making a genuine connection with your audience. Because after all, that's what we want. It's important that you impart information, for sure. But more importantly, it's important that you create a relationship with the people that you're talking to. And by thinking about these 5 things that we're going to talk about now, that makes it much more possible to do. That you are going to create a relationship with the people that you're talking to. So talking about the audience and those relationships, that's actually the first thing you need to think about. So you're going to start thinking, not with you, not with your content, not with opening up a fresh PowerPoint page or Canva or whatever program you use. You're actually going to start thinking about the audience. And the very first thing I want you to think about is, who are you talking to? So who are the people that you are going to go and speak to, in terms of what sectors are they from? Are they only from your sector? Are they cross-sector? Are they technical audiences, so they'll know very specifically about the area that you're talking about? Are they non-technical? Are they mixed? Will you have a bit of both in the audience? What age ranges are they? What's the demographic of the group that you are talking to? And are they sector agnostic? So they're going to come from all different kinds of sectors. So will they have some understanding of what you're talking about? Do you need to think about your language, your jargon, the acronyms you might use, all that kind of thing? But always start by thinking, who are the group of people that are going to be in front of me in terms of their practical demographics? Is a really good way of thinking of it. Then the next thing you want to be thinking about them is, what do they already know? And then I'm going to put in brackets here, or what do they think they know? Because it's a really important distinction, isn't it, between what they actually know and what they think they know about an industry or an organization. So I'll give you an example related to my industry. So if I said to somebody, what is voice coaching? They will probably tell me, oh, it's how you stand up and present. It's how you gesture and how you pause. Now, that certainly is a part of what we do, but it is a very small part, and it actually comes right at the end of all the other kinds of coaching we do. Because actually right at the beginning, we have to work on mindset, because as I've said before, and I will probably say 100 times more, it's about what we're thinking about ourselves as a presenter and an expert in our field that really makes the difference. So My audience might think they know what voice coaching is, but actually what it really is something quite different. So it's important to think about, what do the audience know, absolutely categorically, or think they know, because there may be a perspective shift that you can offer them when you are speaking. And then I want you to think about, what are their issues? What are their concerns? So what do they know? What are they worrying about? What is bothering them? What's keeping them awake at night? What are they concerned isn't working? Or what are they excited about in the future? So thinking about those issues, those concerns, their excitement, can really help you begin to think about the kinds of things that you could talk about that are going to cross over there. So who they are in terms of their demographics, what they think they know or that they already know, and what is bothering them. Then that can sort of start to begin to distill down something very specific that you could begin to talk about. Because I'm going to imagine, because this is true of almost everybody, is actually your area of expertise is a huge area. So if you think about it, you know this much, and your audience is probably going to need to know about this much, right? So we need to distill down what it is you're going to talk about. And then once you've done those first two things, the final thing you're going to think about your audience is, what could they be doing even better? Or what could they know even better? So you can think about what's slowing them down. So what makes their jobs harder? What's slowing down their careers? What's slowing down the impact they might be having with their clients? What's slowing down their efficiency? So think about what's slowing them down or stopping them from moving forward, because that's a really good place you could offer some insight and some expertise. Is there a different perspective that you could offer? So if you're in the same industry, in the same sector, it might be that your organization, your team, have been suffering with the same problems, issues that the rest of your industry has. But maybe you've come up with an amazing solution. Maybe you have a different perspective that allowed you to approach this, I'm going to say problem, in a different way. So maybe you've got a different perspective that you could offer. Or maybe there's something whereby you just iterated very small incremental changes, multiple ones, and now you can do the job even better. And you just want to offer these ideas to other people, all the tiny incremental changes rather than a big fundamental change that can make a difference. So thinking about what's slowing them down or stopping them, what different perspective you could offer. So how do you or your team or your organization see things differently? And what could they be doing even better? And if we think about all those things, so the demographic, what they know or they think they know already, and what could they know that would help them do their jobs even more effectively, we're starting to come around to finding the thing that is going to be most useful for your audience to hear from you. And we're starting to move towards intention. So it's always better to think about, what's my intention with this audience? I want them to understand how easy this could be, or how interesting this particular topic is, or how this particular iteration of working makes everything so much easier. And if we're focusing on that intention, it starts to get easier about what you're going to specifically talk about, but also it takes the attention away from you. So, we were talking earlier about being visible and how that can feel uncomfortable. If we start if we start being concerned about and thinking about the intention, it takes away the feeling of the attention on us. So my recommendation number one is really, really deeply think about your audience first of all. Then number two is think about you. So this is going to require you to really step into that zone of genius, that area of expertise, and own it and say, actually, me and my team, or me and my organization, are really, really good at this. And it can come from experience, as in you've been doing it for a very long time. It can come from you having worked in multiple places and seen all the different iterations of the way something can be done, and you've drawn on all the best practice from all of those. So now you have this incredibly global understanding of how to do your thing better. It could have come from incredible success. It could have come from an outright failure. But you have a perspective and an understanding and an expertise that nobody else has. So very important that you start to think about your area of expertise and be very boundaried about this. So if somebody came to me and asked me to talk, when I talk about all things to do with communication, but if somebody said to me, Emma, could you come and talk to us about cross-cultural communication? I would say I'd love to. I love that topic, that area, but I would say that my understanding in that area is very superficial. But I do have somebody who's amazing at it, because that was her area of research when she did her master's degree. And I would put them in touch with them, because it's not really my wheelhouse. Now, I could go out and I can research and I can read and I can do all of those things and I can talk about it, but I wouldn't be talking about it from my experience. I would be talking about it from book knowledge. Now, for me, that's a very different thing from a sort of visceral, having done it experience. Now, the reason they've asked you to come and talk at for this keynote is because you have that visceral knowledge of doing something, not book knowledge. It's a very different thing. So be very bounded about your area of expertise. What is it that I do and do daily, do incredibly well, that perhaps other people don't think of in the same way? And it's very important to think about your personality in this. I recently have spoken at a conference in Amsterdam, and the different personalities that spoke over the 2 days that we were there were so different, from the extremely extroverted and, funny, sort of slightly comic speeches, to the very quiet, very serious, very structured speeches. They were all good. They all worked, and we learned something from every single one of them, because most of the speakers there were leaning into their personality. They weren't trying to be something that they weren't. And so that was really important. So thinking about what you know and how that fits in with your personality is really, really important. And as I said, bringing your unique perspective to something is very, very important. So I'll give you an example from me. About 15 years ago, I had a really nasty bout of postnatal depression. And I had been an operations director before that, running a company, a director on a board, feeling super confident, really knew my stuff. I've been doing it for a long time, would speak very confidently at conferences, would run team meetings, all kinds of things, run pitches. Didn't bother me in the slightest. And then postnatal depression hit, and I really lost my speaking confidence. Really, really lost it. I mean, I wouldn't say boo to a goose. I hated, my husband used to have to do corporate dinners, and I would go along to those, and I would literally lose sleep for a week beforehand, because I was like, what am I going to talk about? I've got nothing to say, and just really, really unpleasant. But doing voice work really helped me recapture that voice that I used to have and had lost. So my unique perspective when I come to talk about speaking is that nobody is born with an amazing voice. Nobody is born a natural speaker. We all learn how to do it, and we can not have it and learn how to find it, and we can have it and lose it and find it again. So that I've come to talking about speaking very much with that perspective, because that was my lived experience, and I've seen it in my clients over and over and over and over. So I know that when I talk about that, I can talk about it with absolute conviction that the work works. So you will have a perspective, a unique perspective, whether that comes from failure, from success, whether it comes from a bit of both, whether it comes from, decades of experience, it doesn't really matter, but you will have a unique perspective that it's really important to consider when you are doing this keynote speech. So we've thought about them. We've thought about you. Now it's time to think about stories. So, as I said, recently I've been to a few different conferences, and one of the things that is remarkable about human beings is that we love a story, and it is cross-cultural. It doesn't matter how old you are. Everybody is engaged with the story. I was very aware in the room, as soon as someone started to tell a story, there was a collective hush. You could feel people not breathing in the same way. They're very engaged. There was a real stillness in the room when people told stories. So stories have this incredible ability to really grab your audience's attention and get them focused, intently focused on what's going on. Stories are also memorable. So there's some research which says they're about 22% more memorable than just the facts alone. So you can have a story that incorporates facts. If you just give the facts, it's about 22% less memorable. So we want what we're saying to be remembered. It's got to live on beyond the time that you finish speaking. So telling a story can be really helpful. Now, that story could be a story about a product. It could be a story about a team. It could be a story about an organization, someone like Apple. Apple's story gets told a lot. Simon Sinek uses it brilliantly in his stuff. You could be telling a historical story. You could be telling a story about you. But telling those stories does something with your audience. It creates a connection with your audience. Now, if you're telling a story about yourself, about a success or a failure, you're seeding your authority with the audience. You're just planting little seeds. You're not standing there saying, I'm an expert, you have to listen to me. But through telling the story of your experience, you're showing and demonstrating your expertise, far more effective than telling people that you're an expert. Much more influential, much more persuasive, and just less aggressive. It's got a much more feminine energy to it. So using stories to help create a connection between you and your audience and you as the expert in the room, really, really helpful. If stories are missing, it's a bit like having a three-legged stool. There's something that's just not there, and we don't feel fully satisfied as an audience member if we haven't had a bit of a story told to us in some way or another. Now, so that's number 3. So we've thought about them, we've thought about you, we've thought about story. The fourth thing is the balanced story, and it's facts. So facts are really, really helpful. There is no doubt, all the research shows that we make emotional decisions. Okay, so we make an emotional decision about whether we like someone. We make an emotional decision about whether we trust them. We make an emotional decision when we're buying cars or houses, like huge investments. We make a decision based on a feeling, our gut instinct. Then we go searching for the facts to help justify our decision. So if we've told our audience stories, then we really need to have some facts and some figures to back that up. Now, those facts and figures, they can be empirical, so research-based. And one of the speeches I listened to recently was incredibly well researched. It was a really lovely balance between story and research. So she was telling a story about what was going on in her team or her organization, and then she was using evidence to back it up. Now, she had done her research really, really well, and she was using evidence from McKinsey's and Accenture and all really, really robust pieces of research that really supported the processes that she and her team were going through. Now, that is really, really effective because we've got the story. So we've got the human element. We can see what's going on. And she talked about successes and failures. And then she had the research to show us why those things were happening and what they did to then. And the last part of the story is what they did to fix those issues. So by using robust empirical evidence, it does two things. One, it supports our story. And two, it makes us look even more like an expert because our data is backed up by robust researchers. Now, that doesn't mean your data, your facts always have to be empirical. They don't at all. They can be social and they can be anecdotal. So you can tell of experiences that you've had. So, for instance, I don't know if you've come across Amy Cuddy's research about the victory posing or body feedback. So she's a social science researcher who looked at when we take up more physical space with our body, we start to feel more confident. Now, when she presented her TED Talk, it was quite a few years ago, I'm going to say 2015, but I could be wrong, so don't quote me. She was slammed by her community and the research was said to be null and void and unreplicable, etc., etc., etc. And whenever I talk about this stuff, and I teach Amy Cuddy stuff all the time, I always say, this is what happened to her. But then I said, but the anecdotal evidence that I have in the decades that I've been teaching this to different people over different industries is that human beings feel better for having done it. So I don't have the blood data. I don't have empirical knowledge, but I can tell you from decades worth of experience that people feel better for having used it. So can you see that your data doesn't necessarily have to be empirical? If it can be, amazing, depending on what you're talking about, that may be more or less important, but it also can be social. It can be testimonials. It can be human experience. It can be your personal experience. So very important that we have some kind of facts and figures, some sort of data, soft or hard, that can support our stories. And then the final thing. So we've had them, you, stories and facts. So that's kind of what we're going to say. Now we need to jump over to thinking about how you're going to say it. How are you going to deliver it? And this is really, really important. And it will depend on who you're talking to, what your personality is like, how long you've got to prepare, how long you have to speak for. So there's a lot of different parameters that will help you think about your delivery. So I want you to think about 5 different things here. So the first thing I want you to think about is, do you learn it, or do you use your slides as prompts to help you talk about the next thing, or do you script it? And so have your script there as well. So this will depend on you, your learning style, and it's going to depend on the style of what you're talking about. So if you're going to do a presentation or a keynote that is more akin to something like a TED, where you're telling a story, you're wrapping in some ideas and evidence and some process and some life hacks type things, and you're aiming for more inspirational type of an effect on your audience, then I would wholeheartedly recommend you learn it, or learn it to a point that you can have your script there or some slides, but you're really not using them at all. If, however, you're presenting, say, a project, something you're presenting some feedback on a project, you probably are going to want some A/B to help you. You want to have a deck. You don't necessarily need to learn it in that sense. So having your slides there to support you, but then being able to talk knowledgeably about that slide without following a script is going to be really, really important. So either way, in either scenario, absolutely avoid reading. And I'm going to talk about slides in a second, but one of the things I would say about slides is do not read what's on your slide. Just don't do it. I've seen several people do it in the last few weeks, and it just doesn't work. It never, ever works. Your audience can read, right? Put the slide there, let them read what's on the slide, and then you carry on talking. Don't do both. It's really frustrating as an audience member. So think about the style of what you're doing and the impact that you want to create. And then that will help you decide whether you need to learn it or whether it's something you can do by talking knowledgeably about the slide without having a script beside you. Now, the next thing I want you to think about is podium or no podium. And again, so I've experienced both of these different things recently. And if there's an opportunity to avoid using a podium, I would wholeheartedly encourage you to do that. Because what happens if we're at a podium is we kind of get stuck. We sort of hold on to the sides of the podium, which means we don't gesture, which is never a good thing. We get stuck in one position and we end up playing kind of tennis with our head. You know, we're looking over here, then we're looking over there. And it's just not a very satisfying experience for you as the speaker or for your audience members. I would also consider your height. So podiums are designed for tall men. They just are. I was at one of the conferences recently. There was a guy who was like 6'3" or 4" who was presenting. Podium worked brilliantly because we could see most of his chest, we could see all of his arms, we could see all of his head, and it worked. There were multiple speakers at that same conference who were 5 foot and under, and just over 5 foot, and we could literally see shoulders and head. And it diminished their expertise. Even though they were incredible women doing incredible things, they just looked less like an expert because we couldn't see enough of them to look like an expert. So if you don't need to use a podium, don't use it. If you're speaking at a conference, ask for a Lavelle mic, which is one of those roving packs, so you can walk around. Don't be tied to the podium if you don't need to be and you don't want to be. We can all use the clickers. You can progress your slides wherever you are in the room or have somebody else do it. There is no technical reason anymore to be stuck to a podium if you don't need to be. And it's just about asking the conference organisers beforehand or telling them when you're there, actually, I'd rather do this. And if you're smaller, I would absolutely 100% recommend you do not use a podium. So, slides or no slides. Again, I think it comes back to, why are you talking to these people? What is the impact that you're trying to create? If you're trying to create something inspirational, then have some slides if you want, but keep them so incredibly simple that it's literally a word or a picture on a slide. So your audience just look as you're speaking, and they absorb it because they're seeing it and they're hearing it at the same time. Absolutely don't have slides that they're going to need to read or interpret in any way, because it interrupts the flow of you and the conversation. Slides can be really helpful if you've got data to present, if you're trying to show connections between things that are abstract and we need some way to visualize that connection on a screen. It can be really helpful. But if you are going to use slides, there's huge caveats here. Make sure your slides are uncluttered. I've seen so many slide decks recently that were absolutely baffling to read. There was so much information on there, and half of the information on the slide was not relevant to what the speaker was saying. So you didn't know as the listener whether to listen to the person or read the slide. Now, what happens because the slide is bigger at these conferences, we read the slide and we stop listening to the speaker. So you become irrelevant. So make your slides an additional to you. They're not there as the main presentation. They're there to support what you're saying. Make them as simple as possible. Have more slides, have 70, have 100 slides, but have things really simply laid out on the slide so your audience can absorb the information, and build your slides. If you're talking about multiple elements, build them so that you have the thing that you're talking about is bold and everything else is grayed out, so that it's very obvious for your audience what you're trying to get them to focus on at that particular point of the point that you're talking. Otherwise, slides become a distraction and you become an irrelevancy, and the slide becomes the thing. And that's absolutely what we want to avoid. So really, really think about your slides. Are they going to benefit my audience? And if they are, great. If they're there just to help me guide me through the speech, then we need to think about a different way of guiding you through the speech. Okay. The two final things is taking up space and gesture. So if for whatever reason you do get stuck behind the podium, don't forget to gesture. Okay, you can let go of the podium. You can use your hands. Gesture. Make yourself a little bit bigger, because that screen up there is huge and you are much smaller. So you're competing with it in a sense. So you need to gesture to help your audience understand what you're talking about and to make yourself that tiny bit bigger. And if you can take up space across the stage so you're moving, even better. And then pace and pause. So think about speeding up, slowing down. What bits can you speed up because they're light, they're easy, they're throwaway, they're conversational? What bits have more emotional weight to them, or they're complex, or they require imagery, all those kinds of things. If there's anything like that, slow the pace right down. And make sure you're pausing so your audience can absorb your information. So it's not just rattled off from beginning to end, because they'll just feel exhausted after a few minutes and they won't take in everything that you are talking about. And then one final thing is, and this is so, so important, and it goes back to the building confidence. You get the confidence through doing, is accept the praise, right? People are going to come up to you afterwards and they're going to say to you, that was really good. You did brilliantly. And you're going to go, oh, yeah, it was nothing. I just, it was an old, it's just, something. You'll find a reason to make it nothing, right? Don't do it. Accept the praise. Look them in the eye and say, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that, or thank you very much, you were such a lovely audience, or whatever. But look them in the eye and say thank you very much, and let yourself absorb it. Be visible in the praise as much as you are when you're speaking. So, so important, because it helps build the sense of self-trust and that sense of enoughness, which are critical skills for female speakers particularly. So let's just do a quick recap. What did we talk about today? It is so important that you accept those Keynote offers, because you have stuff to offer. They wouldn't be asking you if you didn't. It's going to make you more visible. It's going to make you more credible. It's going to create connections that you didn't have, both physical connections as in network connections and mental connections. You're going to think about things differently in the way that you hadn't thought about them before. You're starting to develop your thought leadership. And by doing it, it's going to create confidence that you didn't think that you had. And then the 5 things you really need to think about as you're going through and creating your speech is them. Who are they? What do they need to know? What's stopping them? What's slowing down? How can I make life easier and better, more effective, more efficient for them? You. Why you? Why are you talking to these people? Why now? What is it you have to offer? What's your unique perspective? What's your personality? And what is your area of expertise? What's your zone of genius? And why have they asked you to come and talk to these particular people? Stories. Make sure there are stories in there, whether that's product stories, personal stories, stories of you and your team, stories of success, stories of failure. Just make sure there are stories, because they help create the rapport with your audience. Have data to back up your stories, whether that's anecdotal or empirical. It doesn't matter, but make sure there's some evidence for your thoughts, your ideas, and your stories. And then finally, think about the delivery. You're going to learn it or not learn it. That's going to depend on you, the time frame, and the content and the outcome that you're trying to achieve with your audience. Do you have slides or not? Again, depends on the content, depends on the audience, depends on the time that you have ready. If you are going to have slides, just make sure they are as simple as possible. Ask yourself every single time, how can I make this more simple? How can I create an image or an icon, something that is going to make this thing memorable to my audience without them having to process too much information? And do not have masses of written information on a slide. It just doesn't work. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. I have never seen a slide with lots of content that has worked. Think about the podium. Do you need to be behind the podium? Are you hiding behind the podium? Are there technical reasons why you need to be behind the podium? If not, get a Lavelle mic, get out in front, get walking. Take up space. So, as I just said, get out front, get walking. Take up space if you do have to be behind the podium, using gesture, and think about how you're going to pace and pause. And then finally, and almost most importantly, is take the praise. When someone comes and tells you you've done a great job, say thank you very much, and really genuinely look them in the eye, absorb it, allow it into you, because that is going to feed your self-confidence. That is going to feed your self-trust. It's going to feed your sense of enoughness. And that means the next time somebody comes and asks you to do a keynote speech, you are going to be much more willing to go, hell yeah, I'm doing that. It was so much fun last time. I trust today's video has been really helpful for you. Please subscribe. We are here every week with a new long form video telling you all about everything to do with speaking at work. Take care, and we will speak soon. Bye now.